This episode is brought to you by KPMG. Making an impact is how KPMG helps make the difference. KPMG applies advanced tools and strategic thinking to convert data into actionable knowledge and deliver value by improving performance through transformation, modernizing processes with technology, harnessing the power of data, navigating complex M&A transactions, and enhancing trust among stakeholders. Go to kpmg.us/advisory to learn more. KPMG. Make the difference.
Quiet Riot. Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot Sunday School, the weekend morsel to our midweek mouthful. I'm Naomi.
And I'm Alex. Now, before we kick off, a reminder that we are putting out more high-quality content than ever before, and it all costs money. So if you can find a few quid down the back of the sofa, then please do pop it into our coffee account to help us continue being able to bring you the goodies.
You can head over to ko-fi.com/QuietRiotPod, and once you're signed up, you'll get invites to our Discord channel so that you can chat with other Quiet Rioters in real time, and then keep your eyes peeled on your inbox for invites from Kenny to our next live session exclusively for our backers.
Well, Naomi, it's not been a slow news week since the rain show went out, has it?
It certainly has not. But at least it does mean that I get to speak to you a bit more often. Listeners, if you didn't tune into our Midnight Mass special on Friday on the demise of Raina's political career and then the subsequent cabinet reshuffle, do go and hoover that up first and then pop back here.
Now, what shall we talk about today? We've promised listeners a number of things, so we've said we'd do a rundown of our thoughts on a story that feels months old, but it's only a couple of days past, and that is the arrest of comedy writer Graham Linehan, creator of Father Ted, over his anti-trans comments.
Indeed, Alex, as much as I don't want to, I think we should. Plus, cherry on top, we've had whatever the opposite of pleasure is in listening to Farage making his speech to the Reform Party conference. Nadine Dorries coming on stage. I don't even know if it was a speech, but whatever it was, we should probably talk about it. And of course, the news about Farage's own tax affairs too. And he got pretty demolished in Congress. So plenty of kind of Farage adjacent stuff to get into.
Yeah, and because it's been such a heavy week, we wanted to end on a little bit of silliness. So we're using Dame Andrea Jenkins' triumphant entrance to the Reform Conference to share some karaoke tips with you, because we're both quite keen karaokeers, aren't we?
Quiet Riot.
This week, the debate around gender identity and free speech has once again flared up after the arrest of writer and activist Graham Linehan. Best known for creating hit sitcoms like Father Ted and The IT Crowd, Linehan has in recent years become a high-profile and controversial critic of trans rights. His outspoken comments online and at events have repeatedly brought him into conflict with activist platforms and now the police. The latest incident saw Linehan arrested following comments he made online, prompting a wave of discussion, not just about his conduct, but also about the way the authorities handle cases involving free speech, harassment, the boundaries of the law as it is. His arrest has polarized opinion, with some seeing it as a necessary intervention and others as an overreach into freedom of expression. Adding fuel to the fire, a number of prominent right-wing outlets and commentators have leapt to his defense, framing the episode as an example of cancel culture and the criminalization of dissent. Of course, J.K. Rowling has weighed in publicly, backing Linehan and echoing the argument that this is about protecting women's rights and resisting so-called gender ideology. But the deeper question is, why are these cultural flashpoints so consuming for certain figures that they're willing to risk their reputations, relationships, and careers in the process. Right, Naomi, shall we start with what Linehan actually said?
So, Alex, I'm not going to sort of repeat it in full, but basically he was talking about when a woman finds herself in a space for women with a trans woman. And if they ask that trans person to leave and they refuse, you should punch him in the balls. So inciting violence against a category of people with a protected characteristic under the eyes of the Equality Act. This was perceived by legal authorities as an incitement to violence, and he was then arrested on return from, I think it was Arizona, to Heathrow earlier this week by 5, I think, Met police officers. So quite a heavy-handed approach in his arrest.
I think in many ways, Linehan's tweets are not a smart set of statements on which this movement should hang its hat, because they are quite openly inciting violence against a group of people. And not only inciting violence against a group of people, but inciting violence against a group that looks like they might be part of that group of people. What it comes down to is that if you pass, as the trans community call it, if you pass as a woman, then no one will bother you. But if you are actually not a trans woman, but a cis woman that looks like they might be trans, then you risk this kind of reaction. And that has always, for me, made it quite an irrational and quite a, shallow debate in many ways.
Yeah. I mean, that isn't keeping women safe. It's certainly not keeping women who are quite masc-presenting safe. And we've heard repeated stories from women now being challenged going into women's toilets since the Supreme Court ruling.
From someone we both know as well, yeah.
Indeed. So these are unintended consequences. I just think that a lot of people have forgotten how to fucking behave. They are not curtailed in their freedom of speech. You can say whatever you like, but it isn't consequence-free, and you cannot publish whatever you like. And he has been hell-bent on publishing it. This is not a rogue tweet. This is not just one tweet, one-off. This is a consistent pattern of abuse against a very marginalised community, as you say, with ripple effects onto all women. And frankly, it is long overdue that he's being held accountable for it. And I just find it remarkable.
He showed up in court wearing fucking sandwich boards.
I know. And the British press lining up time and time again to defend somebody who I believe is deranged. I mean, I think he has been radicalised online to such an extent. And they're lining up to defend him for encouraging violence against trans women, just as he goes on trial for actually assaulting a 17-year-old trans woman, and it all comes out in public. And it's like transphobia is eroding a part of people's brains. I mean, these are bright people making some really big mistakes that are damaging their own lives, not just their earning potential.
Yeah, I actually met Linehan many years ago, and trying to sort of match in my head this person with a person that I met. And the two just don't tally,
It's like a total unraveling and a self-defeating obsession. And it's lost him work, it's lost him friends, it's lost him family. But the more he loses, the more martyred and maniacal he seems to become.
And aggrieved. And it's ended up in a situation where this is all he does. This is all he tweets about. It's the only issue that exists for him.
And what do you think about the police and their handling of it? Like whether or not it was proportionate, whether they look heavy-handed even to those of us that agree he should be arrested, or are they just in a really tough position?
Look, I was quite disappointed to see a lot of pieces, including in outlets like The New Statesman, who ought to know better, really. They put out a piece saying, why is the government arresting people for tweets? And that to me seems a very shallow position. Like, the government is not arresting anyone. The government doesn't have operational influence over the Metropolitan Police's arrest by arrest. They don't go to the Metropolitan Police and say, I would quite like you to arrest Graham Linehan. And if any journalist has evidence that that happens, I would suggest that that is the biggest story here. That is the story they should be investigating and covering. I don't think there is any such evidence, and I don't think it does happen. What's interesting is that it gave the Metropolitan Police the chance to echo that a little bit, and the Metropolitan Police chief came out saying, look, we need clarification of this law, maybe a change in the law, because every time we apply it, basically, we get into trouble. And so people must distinguish in their heads who does what. The law is not put in place by government. The law is put in place by Parliament, obviously with a party whipping system. A government has a very heavy influence into how legislation is shaped, but it's still Parliament that is the legislative body. And this particular law is not a new one. It's not one that's been cooked up by this Labour government. So what you have here is a police acting independently of the government, applying a law that was in place before this government came into power, arresting someone, and then all the newspapers go, Starmer is arresting people because of their tweets. And it's just inane. I mean, it is, from journalists who ought to know better. So that's the first thing to say.
Far be it from me to ever defend the Met Police, I really do. I do think they're in quite a difficult position, being asked to balance free speech and protecting people from targeted harassment. But as I say, Linehan isn't just cracking the odd edgy joke. He is making it a personal mission to hound trans people online repeatedly. So even though I think the arrest did look dramatic, at least it sends a clear message that speech can tip in to harmful behaviour. And at the same time, of course, the police need to be careful not to hand him the free speech martyr badge that he is so clearly desperate to pin on himself. Just as was the case in inciting a pogrom last year, encouraging people to set fire to hotels containing asylum seekers. You can say whatever you like, but it doesn't mean it's consequence-free.
Yeah.
And that message has got to get through to people, and the government should stand by that.
And it's certainly not consequence-free for the people it targets.
Of course not.
And that part of the equation is always lost. We've ended up in a situation where really the pin-ups of free speech right now have become Lucy Connolly and Graham Linehan. And I would suggest to legitimate free speech champions out there who are worried about the overreach of current legislation that those are not the right pin-ups. If you end up dying on a hill in order to defend a clearly hateful and transphobic tweet by Graham Linehan, or some woman saying, I'd be okay if you went out and burned hotels with brown people in them, then your campaign has a problem. And so the only reason I can fathom for them to be really hanging their standard on this sort of case is that there is an active push to expand the boundaries of what's acceptable to say. Yep. And then it becomes, I think, a much more serious issue, because I find myself asking, why is it that the Telegraph wants to legitimize this kind of speech? Why is it that these people are pushing so hard for it to become okay to say, go out there, and if someone looks to you like they're a trans person, if someone looks to you like they're an asylum seeker, then it's okay to go up and punch them.
Absolutely. Like, it is a ready-made culture war headline for the right-wing media. And for them, Linehan isn't just a bloke on Twitter. He is a symbol. And it lets them stoke fear about woke censorship while ignoring the fact that the people, as you rightly point out, on the receiving end of the abuse are often made far more vulnerable because of it. But the Telegraph just love a middle-aged man being silenced more than they love facts and reality.
Quiet Riot. Now, this episode is sponsored by Shopify.
Why Shopify? Well, when we started Quiet Riot, there was so much we had to figure out on our own. Even though we'd both got plenty of experience appearing on podcasts, starting our own from scratch threw up a lot of challenges, from finding studios and designing logos to wrestling with contracts and dealing with platforms.
And on a show like this, the to-do list, I can assure you, is never, ever done, and getting help is essential. Otherwise, the process of creating the show can drain the joy of putting out a podcast that we are so proud of.
For some challenges, that means reaching out to friends who can point us in the right direction, hopefully with a smile and an encouraging pat on the back. But for others, you just need the right tool for a particular job.
For millions of businesses, one of those tools is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands like ours just getting started. As we're developing our thinking about Quiet Riot branded merchandise, Shopify was the first name that came to mind to manage the whole process for us.
It's straightforward enough to get started with your own design studio. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify can help you build a beautiful online store to match your brand's style.
It can accelerate your content creation too. Shopify is packed with helpful tools that help you write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography.
Plus, you can get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. It's easy to create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are, scrolling or strolling.
Best of all, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and more. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify.
So turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your £1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.co.uk/quietriot. Go to shopify.co.uk/quietriot. That's shopify.co.uk/quietriot.
Quiet Riot.
J.K. Rowling has been one of the names at the center of this and was one of the first big names to leap to Linian's defense. Why do you think figures like her continue to stake their reputations on this particular debate?
It should be baffling. Rowling has enough money to buy her own planet. And yet she's on Twitter at 3 a.m. defending Linehan of all people. Is it some kind of like midlife hobby? I think the truth is that when someone builds their identity around being the big, brave one who says what others won't, it is extremely hard to climb down from it. And of course, it's not got almost nothing to do with women's rights at this point and is about clinging to relevance. But the consequences of her action and her particular tweet in defense of him on this was immediately quote tweeted by Elon Musk. Okay. So she did something about, what is the UK coming to that this has happened? Feeding into this now global narrative that the far right are pushing, Elon Musk, chief leader of it, but, Trump there too, Vance, etc., about Starmer's UK is now being handed over to Sharia law and the woke brigade and all of the awful tropes we know are being said about our country, which are entirely untrue.
Yeah.
And this is not a woman of the right, or certainly wasn't. Do I think she agrees with Trump and Vance and Musk on a range of issues? No. But she surely understands the power of her and her many millions of followers to repeat one of their attack lines and knowing that that will not help women. I mean, these are not people who have got pro-women policies at their core. This is a group of men pushing an agenda which is extremely Gilead in style. Do I think she believes in the great replacement theory? No. Do I think they do? I mean, some of them, yes. So I am baffled that even beyond the craziness of her deciding that this is now her life and her one crusade, not Harry Potter, but this, that she doesn't understand enough to temper her reaction, given it is so likely to cause this level of pile-on from people I don't think she does agree with on any other issue.
I think that's quite a charitable explanation, to be honest. I found it very, very interesting that only a couple of weeks ago, Graham Linehan did a podcast with Spiked, where he specifically and explicitly laid into J.K. Rowling for not defending him at all when he was being cancelled over this issue. And very interesting that she then was one of the very first people to leap to his defense when he was arrested, because obviously what he said caused some sort of internal movement within that particular group.
Cultural grouping.
Yeah.
For instance, famously, J.K. Rowling has never mentioned me, never said anything in my defense. And when she got in, I thought, oh my God, it's over. I can I can finally relax. I can finally fight back because someone's on my side, and now her silence about me has just added to the feeling that I've done something wrong, that I'm toxic. And I know I am toxic, but it's not because I've done anything wrong. It's because of things like that. It's because people like J.K. Rowling won't stand up in defense of me.
And so I think that's interesting. Often the most simplistic explanation is not really explored, which is that they're transphobic.
They are.
But I don't mean their actions or their tweets or their doubling down or their inability to sort of accept they may have said something out of turn. Or, what drives this entire thing is that there was a deep-seated dislike, distrust, and disgust about trans people that is actually driving this. And it was aired thinking that it was okay. When they found out that it was not okay, from the backlash that they suffered, that is what's now created this toxic situation.
I know a lot of people who are a bit skeeved out and they find something a bit distasteful, not to their liking at all, but they don't make a career out of it. It's the obsession with this one particular thing they find gruesome that I can't get my head around. That's the bit for me that I'm like, what I don't understand is why it has to become your entire personality 24/7.
It's baffling, I guess, but then again, not, because we've seen it often enough when it comes to racism, when it comes to homophobia, when it comes to all of those issues. We have seen that success and wealth bring a sort of freedom with them that brings with it a coterie of people, of assistants and, helpers and managers and agents whose entire job is to say, yes, you're marvelous to you. And with that, I think, brings a loss of touch and a false confidence that you can say whatever and it's fine because you said it. I mean, especially with J.K. Rowling, one gets such a strong sense that she thinks, I have been a champion of other progressive things. Therefore, everything I say, how can it not be progressive? And her shock at the backlash she got, especially from people of a younger generation that she'd worked with for many, many years. I think it was the cast of Harry Potter turning on her that particularly hurt her into going really to the max on this. Power and money have a corrupting influence. And, you're not exempt by virtue of being someone who has been generally lovely and all for paying taxes and all for acknowledging your roots and, all of those things that are the good aspects of J.K. Rowling. If anything, it puts you into a position of thinking that morally you are above reproach. And therefore, there's nothing you could possibly say for which someone could turn around and say, check yourself.
Quiet Riot. If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
Quiet Riot. And lo, in Birmingham, Nigel Farage took centre stage at the Reform UK conference hours earlier than he was meant to, staging what he calls the party's next step toward government, claiming a double-digit lead in the polls over Labour. With over 12,000 attendees, this is without question their most ambitious gathering yet, and their biggest platform to date for positioning themselves as a serious political contender for the next general election. In a high-stakes moment, Farage welcomed former Tory cabinet minister Nadine Dorries, one of his most high-profile defectors, to the platform. Dorries minced no words in declaring that the Tory party is dead, aligning with Farage on immigration, law and order, and public spending. But the conference wasn't without contradiction, as he seized the moment to criticise the government's entitlement scandal Just moments after Angela Rayner's resignation over her own tax row, a new scoop from Guardian political editor Pippa Crerar revealed that Farage himself is using a private limited company to channel his media earnings, effectively reducing his tax bill, a headline-shaping irony which he will have to answer for. Alex, you and I both watched, through our fingers, if nothing else. What did you make of his speech and the introduction of Dorries as a major player in reform?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because Dorries is both very high profile and a nobody. She's not an MP. She's not a member of the House of Lords. Doesn't have any role currently in the Conservative Party.
She's not even Boris Johnson's girlfriend yet.
Yeah.
That we know of.
I don't know if she was
That's
even...
the only job she ever really wanted.
I don't know if she was even in the Tory Party, to be honest. And her shtick for several years now has been the plot. I think she's written 2 books now on this, explaining how the establishment or the blob or whatever you want to call it is controlling everything and won't let governments do what they need to do, etc., etc. So, she was already really a reformish type person. So it's neither a great shock that she has formalized that position, nor really does it affect the Conservative Party in any operational way, because it just wasn't part of the fold in any sense. You could look at it and say, legitimately, that the leading councillor in a big council, in a big local authority defecting to reform is more consequential than Nadine Dorries doing it. But she does have a huge public profile, and as Farage pointed out, straddles that weird world between politics and celebrity. And so she's a big scalp, I guess.
Divided parties don't win election, and when a party has disloyal MPs, and I know something about this, I was the architect, the person who made the Posh Boys comment. I know what it's like to be disloyal. I've been around for 30 years. I learned the error of my ways.
I thought it was fascinating, utterly fascinating, that the one thing she chose to sort of slap herself over the wrist was having shown disloyalty, and specifically her comments about Cameron and Osborne being posh boys that didn't know the price of milk. So there was a section in the speech where she was saying that the Conservative Party is falling apart because there's no loyalty there anymore. And then she went into a side alley saying, and I know what disloyalty has been like because, naughty me, I've been disloyal in the past. And I thought that was just fascinating because it was the one thing that I ever gave her credit for. That intervention is probably the best thing Nadine Dorries has ever done. But in order to subsume herself into the total that is Reform UK, it was that bit of herself that she felt she had to distance herself from.
Farage did a lot of talk about go back to your constituencies and prepare for war, basically claiming that, look, the general election is going to happen much sooner than 2029 because Labour are going to completely implode and this government is going to fall. Are they becoming a little too convinced that they've got it in the bag for the next election? Like, how much of a risk is it to talk that up?
A big risk, I think.
To the extent that he is.
A big risk, I think. Because as I was saying before, their entire operation relies on the maintenance of momentum. And so if they get to the Senate elections or the Holyrood elections or a by-election of some sort and they don't win it, or they don't win it convincingly, or they don't achieve the sort of percentages that we're seeing in the national polls, then suddenly and very, very quickly the conversation will switch to, are they not moving forward in the way they thought they would be? Are they underperforming?
And of course, the Tories haven't got rid of Badenoch yet. That is another thing that will almost certainly happen between now and the next general election. And you could see quite a revival from the Tory. It's hard to believe it right now, but you could see some kind of revival and sort of post-election bounce for a new leader there. So I think that, yes, it is your job as a leader, and every single party conference coming up in the next few weeks will have a leader saying, we're not here for anything other than government. We're going to try and win. Ed Davey will say it, I'm sure, as certainly will Zach Polanski. So I think that's sort of fine, but I think the expectation mismanagement is real, and they are really overplaying their hand at the moment because, A, it's a long way away, even if it is earlier than 2029, and so many moving parts are happening in politics at the
So
moment. I
many
mean, as we're
moving
recording,
parts.
the reshuffle is happening in the Labour government, but so too will there then be a reshuffle to match it in the Tories. And as you say, next year is a big election year, which could see chess pieces being moved quite drastically in all parties.
And also, of course, how closely they've attached themselves to the Trump project, how that pans out in the States, what people's impression internationally is of how that term went at the end of it, which will probably come before the next election.
Yeah.
All of that will play into it. And there is a big, big risk for them that by saying we are now the status quo, they rob themselves of really their biggest weapon, which
Being
is
the
we
change
are
agent.
here to upset the status quo.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
are the insurgents. We
Yeah.
need your help. We need you to go out and vote for us. If they end up lulling their supporters into a sense that it's a done deal,
Yeah.
you don't need to do much more, we've already won the next election, that is a massive, massive risk. And you see more professional and more experienced parties spend every fiber of their rhetoric saying this isn't done yet, not a single vote has been cast yet. I mean, remember, this is the position that Labour were in for years
June
and years.
2024 particularly.
For years,
saying,
though, before the election. They went ahead, I think, for the first time in 2022, late 2022, maybe early 23. I think they're showing their inexperience. And if you were asking me to place a bet right now on who might form the next government, based on where everything is at the moment and the odds that I would get for each option, I would be putting money on the Conservatives, genuinely. I know that's not an easy thing to hear, but I think that Reform have shown themselves so arrogant and simultaneously so unprofessional. I mean, that conference, it was a shambles.
Yesterday, you said you were going to stop the boats within 2 weeks of being in government. You misspoke, didn't you?
No, I didn't say that.
We will stop the boats within 2 weeks of winning government.
I didn't say that. I said we'd stop the boats within 2 weeks. Well, within 2 weeks...
You'll stop the boats.
Within 2 weeks of passing the legislation, we'll stop the boats. Yes, as quickly as is humanly possible. And once we have the powers we need, within 2 weeks it'll stop.
So you'll pass the legislation to stop the boats?
Well, we can't stop the boats now. No one can.
So within 2 weeks, once you change the law, there will be no more boat crossings?
That's right.
And if people attempt to come across, what do? Just send them back to France?
Detain. Immediately detained, not free to walk the streets, and deported as quickly as is humanly possible. OK, so the boats still might come. You'll have all of those return deals in place in the first 100 days of a Farage government on the record, you're saying that? I absolutely believe that, yes.
OK.
Yes.
Is that correct? Will you detain the women and children? Yes. Will you send them back?
Yes, women that arrive by boat will be deported immediately.
To Afghanistan?
Yes, if necessary.
You will send...
Of course, we'll have to know that we're sending them off somewhere sensible.
So you might not send them back?
Hang on, if a 4-year-old kid arrives, chucked on a dinghy, we will have a duty of care.
I'd love to know what you thought about how people reacted to certain bits of his speech, because I was watching it from a distance at my desk. I could see it and hear it on the big screen, but I didn't have cans on like you would have done. How did the room seem to react to some of the things about, making life easier for rich people, which we all know is what his number one goal is?
It went down like a lead balloon, Naomi. He would say things like, the police need to arrest people for shoplifting, not for tweets. Massive cheer in the room, right? Anything culture war-y got a big, big cheer. Anything actually Thatcherite policy-wise, it did not get a very warm reception in the room. So the idea of, enticing rich people to come back and making the city a sort of haven for crypto and cutting the welfare state significantly, all of that was very coldly greeted in the NEC conference centre.
We will bring cheap energy and we will do our utmost to re-industrialise Britain, to start making things here that we want and we need. We will save huge sums over the course of the next months, outline some serious cuts to the welfare budget in this country. It is not fair, and will end this disastrous exodus. The rich are leaving. Some people think that's fine. But if the rich leave, if the biggest taxpayers leave, it means everybody else has to pay more. It doesn't make any sense. The politics of envy has never, ever worked.
And I think that's quite interesting because they've put together this very broad coalition and I'm not sure they understand it.
Well, I will give you a little teaser, if you like, Alex. So regular listeners will know that at Best for Britain, we've done a big piece of work segmenting the Reform voter base. And we found that there are kind of 5 different distinct groups that are currently intending to vote Reform. And they differ wildly on issues around tax and spend in particular, but even on Europe and climate change and things like that. Immigration ties them all together. But there are some real difficult traps for him where one bloc will strongly support him and the other 4 won't. For instance, and then there's a propensity of each of those blocs to actually turn out and vote. And you're right, the Conservatives, the traditional Conservatives, will go out and vote, even if they are currently in smaller number at the moment, saying that they will back him. And we have got some fresh polling coming out very, very soon. And Quiet Riot listeners will be amongst the first to hear it in next week's show.
Very, very interesting teaser. What I found interesting is also that he signposted really their biggest problem right now, which is recruitment. I mean, the whole thing was like an appeal to people to put themselves forward as candidates because they obviously have nowhere near the number of candidates they need. And that was the basis on which he also defended the sort of accepting into the fold of any Tory, basically, that wants to defect right now. That's the position, whatever they say. And I was watching it on YouTube. I was watching it on the Reform UK channel. And loads of the comments scrolling up on the side were about all these Tories coming over to the party. And I'm really worried, are we still going to change things or are we just becoming the Tories in disguise? Again, I think there's a risk there. They can't do anything about it because, like I said, the big problem right now is they don't have experienced candidates, certainly not vetted candidates. So they need to be pinching them from Tories.
They'll be looking at a Labour government that came in after 14 years in opposition that put very few people into ministerial roles who had ever been in a ministerial job beforehand. They overlooked people like Emily Thornberry and Liam Byrne, who did have some experience. And they are now watching the consequences of a very green cohort who really didn't know anything about running a country and will not want to fall into that trap. And he made quite a big thing of saying, well, you know, she has run a major government department. I mean, you know, asterisk terribly badly and everyone thought she was awful at it. But you know, she's done it and he hasn't. So I think you're dead right about that. And it is no mean feat to find that many candidates, particularly for the locals as well as, you know, the 650
and I just think,
constituencies.
Going back to what you were saying about how the cohorts segment and what people want and what people importantly are reform curious at the moment and what might make them switch over versus say no thanks. I really do think they're showing their inexperience here because they're both quite boastful and arrogant about how well they're doing and also taking on quite a lot of the features that they say were rotten about the establishment, about what had gone on before. And I think they're creating a situation for themselves where they might find themselves in a position of suddenly being on 20%. If they had managed that expectation well, that would look like a huge victory compared to the date of the previous election. Because they haven't managed expectations well, that might look like they're yesterday's men and give the Tories the opportunity to say, that's still a wasted vote. I think it's actually a big gift to the Tory party, what's happened. It's given the Tories a much quicker window in which to detoxify, actually. If the Tories selected someone sensible and charismatic to lead them next year, they could very easily present Reform UK as basically a pension scheme for failed Tories and say, well, you know, you can keep people like Nadine Dorries. They were never really
Yesterday's
in the
men
mainstream.
gone to the Reform retirement home.
And I think they could very easily end up on 30-odd% again.
Who is that charismatic leader that you think they should go for?
Of the people in the running at the moment, obviously between Jenrick and Cleverly, it would be Cleverly. that is the obvious one, but maybe there are newer entrants to the party who I don't know about. It's always the people you don't know about that tend to really take the country by surprise.
Quiet Riot. Leading a business today means constantly adapting. On the Executive Insights podcast, brought to you by AWS, global leaders share how they're making tough calls, testing bold ideas, and putting innovation into practice, generative AI included. If you're looking for real stories behind what's working, this is it. Subscribe to the Executive Insights podcast today, available now on all major podcast platforms.
Quiet Riot. Now, Farage's proximity to Trump is one of those very issues that not everybody currently backing reform likes. Some of them do. A big chunk of them really don't. Farage remains a deeply unpopular figure here in the UK. And Nigel has just flown back from an Oval Office cozy up with him. He'd flown over there to speak at a hard right event, which hilariously he was late for, and then to give evidence to Congress. I hope that our listeners have seen the amazing takedown he received.
There is a free speech crisis in America today, but there's no free speech crisis in Britain. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has not shut down GB News, where Mr. Farage has his own show, just because Mr. Farage has used his airtime to call for banning peaceful protests that he disagrees with. No one has stopped him from going on Russian TV 17 times and saying that the one world political leader he most admired was Vladimir Putin, even though Vladimir Putin is a war criminal. No one has stopped Mr. Farage from parroting Putin's absurd talking points, like when Farage claimed that NATO, the US, and Britain provoked this war in Ukraine. For a man who fashions himself as some kind of a free speech martyr, Mr. Farage seems most at home with the autocrats and dictators of the world. To the people of UK who think this Putin-loving free speech imposter and Trump sycophant will protect freedom in your country, come on over to America and see what Trump and MAGA are doing to destroy our freedom. Kidnap college students off the street, ban books from our libraries, militarize our police and unleash them against our communities, take over our universities, wreck our professional civil service, and turn the government into a money-making machine for Trump and his family. You might think twice before you let Mr. Farage make Britain great again.
What stood out for you in all of that trip, Alex?
It was very frustrating to see how easy it is to take him apart.
Do you mean frustrating that nobody here has done that?
Absolutely.
Right.
Just how flustered he gets when challenged. Few journalists here are really doing that, really going at him for his record, for his support for Putin, all of this stuff, for his tax affairs, which there's a big piece in The Guardian that contains several strands to it. One of them is his arrangements through an offshore company that avoids him a chunk of tax. But there's also stuff in there about, for instance, his constituency house, which apparently he's bought, but put in the name of his girlfriend to avoid stamp duty. Now, he stood up in that arena and he opened with that. He made that the first sentence that came out of his mouth was about how Angela Rayner is a hypocrite because she tried to avoid stamp duty. Whether his arrangement was legal or not, because I find, another aspect of the Rayner misogyny that I find so infuriating is that whenever we're talking about Rayner, we're talking about, does it pass the sniff test? What does it look like? Does it look improper? But whenever we move to some right-wing bloke that does very aggressive estate planning, it goes, well, technically, he didn't break the law. And it's like, well, okay, put out the details. Put out those details that he bought a house in his constituency, he paid for it, but it's in his girlfriend's name so that he pays the lowest band of stamp duty, and see whether that passes the sniff test with people, because it might not.
Exactly. And the Piper Carrera expose of his vehicle to avoid tax means that he's paying 25% corporation tax on profits rather than 40% income tax on earnings. And this is for his GB News earnings, which are not insignificant. This is patently at odds with a huge swathe of people who vote reform, who are unable to make ends meet, are struggling to put food on the table because their earnings have not kept up, who are PAYE for tax. This is a very, very wealthy man who went to an incredibly expensive school and has lived the high life on the golf course forever and uses private planes and all the rest of it. And we have a right-wing media desperate to maintain that this is a man of the people, this image that he represents everyone, when in reality, he represents the 1%.
And it takes an American senator to point that out, which is why I'm saying it's pretty infuriating. But, let's hope that chickens will come home to roost. Because again, I think there is something genetically in the right-wing press that would prefer a competent and electable Tory party to Farage. And I think if and when the Conservative Party refashions itself into some sort of electability, I think you will see some of the titles and some of the media companies currently pushing Farage as the Messiah quietly peel off.
Quiet riot.
Now, apparently, our politicians are now competing not only for votes, but for chart positions. Yes, political karaoke is back in the headlines. At the Reform UK conference, Andrea Jenkins came out with a cheek mic and treated the faithful to a serenade that was part rallying cry, part Britain Got Talent audition. It was just very, very strange. I think the lyrics were self-penned. Somewhere Simon Cowell just shuddered in his sleep and extended his hand as if to press an invisible button. And it doesn't stop there, because apropos of that, a video has re-emerged of freshly anointed Green leader Zach Polanski back in his Lib Dem days, which were only about a decade ago, belting out a gospel number with a choir at a rally.
Fight back, Lib Dem, 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 fight back.
So between Jenkins's power ballad and Polanski's soulful harmonies, you do start to wonder, is karaoke the new hustings? Now, Naomi, I know that you love a karaoke. So what would you prefer to sit through? A full set of Andrea Jenkins songs or Zach Polanski's gospel singing?
Well, I was at the Zach Polanski gospel singing. I was there cringing so hard. I think I might even have quietly left the room because it was so painful to watch. And what I will say about the Jenkins serenade is that at least they looked like they were really enjoying themselves. That magic touch that the Reform Party seem to have with their faithful is lacking when you go to other party conferences. I mean, last year, Labour's party conference was very downbeat for a party that had just won so big because of all of the Wahid Ali stuff and winter fuel, and they're all feeling very sorry for themselves. And I think it will be, potentially lower this time round. And other parties do a lot of self-criticism and shout at each other for not being purist enough on one policy or another. So on that basis, I think I'm actually going to go for Andrea Jenkins.
Right.
Sorry to say.
Yeah.
At least they looked like they were having fun.
She looked like she was having fun. That's for sure. It was the length that I would question there, because, okay, she's a decent singer. I think she's a trained singer, actually, in a previous life. And so she's not a bad singer. It was a little bit flat, but those earpieces are notorious for not being able to hear yourself properly. So I'm not going to judge her too harshly on that. But the thing is, a couple of sentences would have done it. It would have been a little sprinkling of fun.
Leave them wanting more, Andrea.
On her speech, but she just went on and on. She sang the entire song. And then when she sort of finished, she burst into a really embarrassed laugh. She was like,
Oh no.
yeah, it was bad.
Bring back the Maybot doing her dancing on stage to ABBA.
But having said that, I would probably also plump for her because the choral thing, at least the excerpt that I saw, was characterized by much more, let's say, volume and enthusiasm rather than musical ability. So at least she wasn't like really loud. Now, what are your tips for karaoke? I know you have your favorite songs. I know you have strategies.
Well, I think practice. If you want to be,
Oh, that's such a Naomi
passable.
thing. I love that.
There is a risk of belting it out too loudly. I think you've got a crescendo to that. Take your audience by surprise. Maybe begin the song sitting down and then stand up as you get to a chorus. It is a performance. It's not just about a song. So it doesn't matter whether you can sing particularly well or not. You've just got to give the audience entertainment. So I think the physicality as much as the vocal prowess is needed. What about you? You're a much more experienced singer than I am.
And as you also know, I absolutely loathe karaoke. And I think I speak for many people who maybe have sung in more professional settings. The idea of not knowing what key something is going to be in, the idea of not having any influence on the tempo or the orchestration, and the idea of just standing up there and doing something with no rehearsal is abhorrent to me. Having said that, my tip is very, very simply to choose unillustrious singers. That is the smartest thing you can do. Like the number of people that I see going into karaoke and thinking, oh, I'm going to sing a Whitney Houston number, something like that. Really? Really? That your first instinct is to match that range? No. Do a Leonard Cohen song. People will be shocked that you're actually singing it rather than reciting it. Basically, match yourself with a singer. If you think your voice has the range and quality of X person, like I know, for instance, I can sing anything Howard Keel has sung in any musical. You put a Howard Keel, he's the main brother in Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. He's the male lead in Kiss Me Kate, in Kismet, bloke with a beard, sort of hands on hips, bless your beautiful hide type stuff. The key will suit me, the range will suit me because my voice basically charts onto his really, really well. So who's your one? Because I know that you must know whose singers' songs you can pretty much do all of them.
This might make me sound like I'm a better singer than I am, but oddly enough, it's Nina Simone. Even though
Nina Simone is a great
she is an incredible
example.
singer,
Yeah,
but I do have
singer.
quite a similar range. Yeah.
Incredible singer, but she doesn't extend
Beyond,
between.
no.
She's a really good singer. I mean, My Baby Just Cares for Me, and I've heard you do that. It's a great song for karaoke. Absolutely great. Cher is another one.
Yeah,
Actually,
Cher is.
Cher has quite a limited range. But the songs are very catchy and very well known. They're great for karaoke.
Right. If we had a full Westminster karaoke night, Alex, this is what we're going to end with. You can pick any politician, past or present, to own the stage. Who are you going for? And who do you reckon would just clear the room in an instance?
Oh, God, I hate to say it, but I think Starmer would clear the room.
I think Johnson would.
They're both not very musical voices for different reasons. Johnson is gruff and he would reduce anything he was doing to comedy because he lacks the self-confidence to express any kind of earnest emotion.
Yeah.
And people like Starmer or Reeves are very, very nasal. So unless they chose very, very cleverly, I reckon they could be quite painful. Now, who would do well? I would say politicians that tend to speak from the diaphragm. So politicians that tend to have a very well-connected, earthy voice, like, let's say, Emily Thornberry on one side. I am sure is good at karaoke because she has a sense of fun, she has a sense of performance, she has quite a musical voice, and she breathes and speaks correctly because of her past as an advocate, I suspect. And on the other side, I think probably Kemi Badenoch has quite a good voice. Again, she's very connected, nice, solid belter, mezzo-soprano. I think she could do quite well.
I'm going to throw in one other.
Yeah, go for it.
because I know that she's a good karaoke
really?
singer. Also formerly of the Quiet Riot parish, Layla Moran.
Oh, really?
She can do a bloody good Radiohead creep.
Wonderful. She sounds like a soprano to me. I think she could probably do quite well in things that are quite high up as well.
And it does. He goes in, Tom York goes into the falsetto range and that.
Cranberries, maybe. Like, that's another example. People trying to do Kate Bush at karaoke. It's like, what is wrong with you? Where are you going with this? Anyway, so that's our advice. And we'd love to know what your favorite karaoke tunes and tips are.
And whether or not we could do it as a fundraiser. Karaoke with Naomi and Alex.
Oh,
and maybe
my God.
Emily Thornberry and Layla Moran.
Oh, my God. That would be amazing. A Quiet Riot karaoke night. I would pay money for that.
Quiet Riot. Okay, Alex, on that high note, our cup runneth over, and so does our recording time. So let's call it a day there. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in again and for all your lovely messages that you've been sending us lately on email and Blue Sky. The feedback really does help keep us going and means the absolute world to us.
But if you could also do it publicly by leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts. Remember, if you've left a review already, that does not prevent you from leaving another one. You can at any point and on any platform. We'd really be immensely grateful because it helps boost the algorithm so more of you can find us.
We're back on Thursday with head honcho of the Business and Trade Select Committee, Liam Byrne, unless, of course, he gets promoted before we record. So keep your eyes peeled for that one. But until then, thanks again and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
We love you lots and lots. Bye.
Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Alex Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Connolly. And edited by me, Alex Rees. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Sandstone Global.
Quiet Riot.
Can you just explain to me?
Yeah, so you just do consonants until the end of every sentence.
If you're trying to do what?
If you're trying to do Shirley Bassey, you
right.
just have to do consonants, yeah?
Like this.
So, is it? I hope this is from a knit, though.
It's for the world, Alex. It's for the world.
Down to world. They are all
Our public schools are a place where all kids feel like they belong.
My children.
My family. My community.
All students. All students.
All students belong in a great public school.
Let's get ready for back to school at nea.org/backtoschool.